So I'm going to tell you the story of my brief encounter with a man called Happy. So in 2013, I'm working at a cannabis dispensary in Venice Beach, a block from the boardwalk. A good 35% of our patrons were unhoused people. Occasionally, someone experiencing severe psychosis would try to come in, but if they were screaming or unintelligible, security would not let them in. If they had and presented the holy trinity of medical papers, ID, and cash, they were good to go. We had a compassion program where we'd bag up grams of shake left over from the bottoms of jars and give them completely free, one per person per day, to anyone who asked. Word about this spread quickly on the boardwalk. Generally, these people would be the nicest, most polite and considerate customers, even if they did smell a bit stinky and their money got pulled out of a sweaty sock. No one working there would bat an eye if someone came in smelling like they'd slept on the beach for a week next to a bottle of vodka, as long as they just calmly buy their weed and be on their way like any other customer. It's a foggy, chilly day around the holidays, sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Someone called out, so I was the only person in the back bud tending. There was another employee at reception and the security guard at the front door. I'm alone in the back room. There are cameras, but no one is actively watching them. This guy walks in after being checked in at the front. He's the only customer at the moment, and I swear the whole room gets colder as he walks in. He's wearing a very worn-in, deeply faded, wrinkled, conformed to his body, floor-length leather duster jacket, and a similarly beaten-up, wide-brimmed leather cowboy hat. It looked like he'd lived and slept in these same clothes for years. We didn't allow hats, hoods, or sunglasses in the store, so I'm surprised that security didn't make him take off his hat. The man had to be at least 6'5" and built like a boulder, not obese kind of large, pick you up and toss you around like a rag doll large. The stench that comes off of him is unlike anything I've ever smelt before or since. It was beyond BO, beyond soiling yourself. It smelled like actual death, as if though he had raw, rotting carcasses tucked under his thick, long leather coat. I thought I had been hardened by plenty of nasty body stank before, but this was absolutely revolting, far beyond anyone who hadn't showered lately or peed their pants. I'm trying not to inhale very deeply, and I say, "Hi, sir. Excuse me, I'm sorry, but would you mind taking off your hat? It's store policy." Big customer service smile. "What are you looking for today?" He grunts deeply, and he's walking very slowly, shuffling and dragging his feet. His voice sounds like he gargles with gravel, rough and wet, raw and angry. "I don't take off my hat." At this point, I'm not trying to argue with this man about his hat either. Let's get him in and get him out. I glance down and I see he's not wearing shoes. The bit that I can see from under his coat, one of his ankles is massively purple and black and swollen, melon-sized. The bottoms of both of his feet are bloody and torn up, and I realize that he is leaving a slight trail of blood as he drags his ragged feet across the concrete floor on the shop. My first thought is, how and why did security let this guy come in? Second is, this guy is obviously seriously injured, and that is concerning as a human being. I'm making sure to keep the display shelf between me and this guy, and that's only about a foot of space, like a bar. He gets to me, and the stench gets stronger. I meekly but sincerely ask, "Are you all right, sir?" His eyes flare at me. "What do you care?" And I'm like, "Well, I tried. Not my chair, not my problem. Not my monkeys, not my circus, you know." "Well, great. What can I get for you?" He pulls up one of his sleeves to expose his forearm, and it's covered in large, round burns like from a cigar. Some old, healed, and some fresh, pussy, and infected. It's not track marks, it's actual burns. He also has a jagged, homemade-looking stick and poke tattoo of a smiley face, a crooked circle, 2 lines for the eyes, and scabbed-up curve of a smile. He points at this tattoo. "Happy. My name is Happy." The rotting stink was so strong that I needed to breathe little gasps of air, the least possible. "I walked here. I walked all the way here from Pasadena." I'm like, "Wow, sir, that's a really long walk." Anyway, what are you looking for today? Just for you. His eyes are dark and menacing. He is smeared with a layer of grime like he lives in the woods. He doesn't look like the average crust punk or disabled veteran you generally see living on the beach. It's hard to guess his age, but he wasn't that old or young, somewhere between 30 to 50, I guess. He looked like he dragged himself here from his log cabin, like what would happen if you entangled some quantum mechanics poorly and mixed Ed Gein with an 1800s homesteader, then transported him to 2013 Venice Beach. I, of course, have never seen this man before. Once was more than enough to make him unforgettable. He keeps staring at me, and I move as far back as I can to the wall, hopefully out of his grasp if he lunged. I would need to walk out from behind the case and around him to get to the security guard. I'm weighing my options. I decided to grab a bunch of compassion grams and then weigh out an eighth and mark it down that I'd pay for it later, and he's still just leering at me, wheezing heavy, stinky breaths. We actually have a special today, only for people who walked more than 10 miles to get here. This is all for you, on the house. Thanks for stopping by. He accepts the bag, but continues to just stand there and stare at me. Thank you, Happy. It worked. He grunts a guttural noise that is not a word and slowly turns to shuffle back towards the door. At the door, he turns back to me and says, "I'll see you later." He finally walks out after, leaving plenty of his residual stench of death behind. Thank any and all of the gods that I did not see Happy later or ever again. When I asked security why did they let him in, he said that when he had noticed his bloody feet and said, "Hey bro, you all good? It looks like it hurts." Happy had stepped up to his face and threatened to choke him out and called him a slur. And since it was just him and two 22-year-old 130-pound girls, he wasn't trying to die tonight and figured hopefully Happy could just get his stuff and leave. He was watching the cameras in the back, ready to call the police and owners if anything got weird. Apparently we had different definitions of weird, but I understood his reaction, and ultimately we were all fine, just spooked and creeped out. And now needing to clean blood off the floor with bleach and gloves and texting our boss that he owed us free weed. He agreed, and we all lived happily ever after. When I turned 17 last year, my two friends and I had a little get-together and planned to go out that night. One of my friends were active on Tinder and been chatting with an 18-year-old guy named Jens. This guy asked if we could come and meet him at a bar in Utrecht in the Netherlands. We thought, oh my god, free alcohol with a hot guy, that sounds fun. We got ready, took a train, and within 15 minutes we were in Utrecht. We stopped at some stores and a restaurant before reaching the bar, and once inside, we sat on high chairs, but we didn't see the guy from the Tinder profile, so we just waited. And then, my friend received a message saying that he was delayed, so we continued waiting. We ordered some Cokes, and my friend tried to message the guy again, but the messages went unanswered. After a while, a man who had also been sitting at the bar the whole time asked us if he could buy us a drink. This man was maybe 30 years old, but since there were three of us, we came for a free drink, and we said yes. He ordered us shots, and we continued our conversation. Each time we finished the shots, he would just get us new ones. At one point, he joined our conversation, and later we all moved to a lounge in the corner of the bar. We were all kinds of tipsy, and we were enjoying ourselves. And this went on for a while. We talked about our favorite artists, but then he started asking very suggestive questions. We didn't appreciate it because this man really wasn't attractive, quite unattractive actually, and obviously way too old. I started feeling too tipsy and needed some water, so I got up to ask for water at the bar. When I did this, the waitress told me that we absolutely should not go home with that man that we were sitting with. She explained that at their bar, a young girl would often come, get stood up, and then this supposedly nice man, who always seemed to be there when a girl got stood up, would buy them a drink, get them drunk, and ask them to go home with him. That man was the one, that we were sitting with. I didn't immediately make the connection, but I understood that this man wasn't as nice as he seemed. When I returned to our table, I told my friends that I wanted to go home, and they agreed. We tried to say goodbye, but the guy kept pressuring us to have another drink or go to another bar. He said that he had Bacardi at his home and asked if we wanted to go get it. He continued pressuring us and even walked with us out of the bar. I freaked out, thinking that this man was going to follow us home, but eventually, he seemed to enter another bar and we took our train back home. The next day, I realized what had happened. I told my friends about what the waitress had said, and when my friend tried to contact the Tinder profile, she discovered that he had blocked her. I am 100% sure that the 30-year-old man who coincidentally was there to be friendly with us when we got stood up was actually the 19-year-old that we were supposed to meet up with. I think about what could have happened if we had gone with him to his home, and I'm so happy that there were 3 of us. I don't know what could have happened if I were alone. For every young girl in the Netherlands out there, if you come across a Tinder account under the name of Jens, don't be too quick to meet him. I believe he lives in Utrecht City, as he asked us to walk with him for Bacardi. If you happen to get stood up and a guy about 30 years old with short dark blonde hair and uneven eyebrows offers you drinks, don't accept and run. I want to talk about one of the scariest experiences I've had, which happened quite recently, and I apologize for the length of the story. I, recently a 24-year-old female, was living in a woman's shelter and made some really good friends there. We used to sit at a park across from a temple at night, drinking and smoking whatever we had. We would spend hours there listening to music, having fun, and discussing our lives. We were all quite young, in our early 20s. I should mention that we all had experienced a fair amount of trauma in our lives, and we connected through that shared experience. One night, my friends and I went to a party in the city and had been drinking for hours. When the party was over, we weren't tired, so my closest friends there, a 22-year-old female, and I decided to go to the park and watch the sunrise and have a little more to drink. We were there for a while when suddenly we heard R&B and rap music coming from the temple across the street. I should mention that we were both mixed black girls, and being tipsy, we thought it would be a strange adventure to go over there and see who was playing my favorite song so loudly in the morning at a temple. It could have been a potential friend or a chance to learn more about the place, and the temple looked beautiful. We walked over, but the gates were locked. We felt disappointed, but then a man came out to greet us and said that we could come in to see the temple. He mentioned that it was his music and that he loved that we liked the same songs. We went inside and he showed us around the temple. The bottom part was beautiful, but we noticed several rooms with beds. He told us that if we ever wanted to rent rooms, it would be unbelievably cheap. As homeless girls with not much work, we thought it was an amazing opportunity, almost too good to be true. At first, I felt nothing but positive vibes. He showed us his computer playing the music and asked us which songs we wanted to hear. I became comfortable with this guy because he was funny and we all got along really well. Anyway, we started discussing recreational activities that rhyme with marijuana, and we had some and we offered it to him because he was so cool and laid back. He said he would pack our stuff with our things, which becomes important later. I should add that he constantly complimented me specifically on my hair and skin color, and he made very forward compliments that made me uncomfortable. He started asking if I liked Asian men and if I'd ever slept with one. He was of Eastern Asian descent, though I'm not sure where exactly. Then he proceeded to ask more questions about my preferences and told us about giving drugs that I can't mention to girls to smoke and get with them. These were drugs that no one should ever do. He also mentioned that he would see us sitting at the park sometime through his window, and all of this started to raise a lot of red flags. He then said that if we had another friend, they could also take his room because he was moving soon. And that's when I got a weird feeling, so I decided to ask him why he was leaving if the rent was so cheap. He wouldn't answer and kept dodging the question. My intuition was telling me that something was wrong, and it's ridiculous that it took me so long to realize it. I asked if I could get some water, and he told me to get one out of the fridge. When I went out, there was another guy there who was nice and offered me water, but I decided to get a glass and use the tap. He runs out of the room my friend was in and says, "No, the one from the fridge." I said, "I'm fine with this." He walks me back to the room and I sit back down next to my friend. And then he went on to say, "I'm moving because I hear people screaming and touching each other every night. Noises banging on my door, sounds of people being tortured and hurt, and it disturbs my sleep." What? It was almost like he accidentally slipped out of what he had just said. I almost thought it was a joke, and I asked him, "Is it nightmares, ghosts, or real people that are making these noises at night?" And he continued to dodge my questions. I asked why on earth he didn't tell us this earlier. We were honestly in disbelief, and he continued to ignore what we were saying and acting strange. I then noticed that he had closed the door when I came back in earlier, and I started to think that we needed to get the hell out of there. He then said, "You have to listen to this song. You'll love it." It gets worse. He puts on this terrifying chant/Viking-like song and plays it loud, too loud, and he's chanting this song so loud that we're yelling at him to turn it off, and he doesn't seem to be listening, and the video is like Viking-like people hurting other people. As we're begging him to turn it off because it's terrifying, and why would he or anyone like that music, he turns his face to us fast and screams maniacally, with his teeth showing, his tongue out, and his eyes wide. It was like the most distorted face I'd seen in real life. He didn't look human. No sane person would act this way. My fight or flight response isn't really good. I just sat there trying to laugh it off, but I was really frozen in fear. My friend, on the other hand, was in fight mode. She threatened to beat him up if he didn't let us out right now. And I ran to the door, and he ran at me, so I froze in front of him again, and he wouldn't open the door because it was locked. We start running out of the house while he's laughing maniacally, speed-walking behind us, and we bolted out. And mind you, I'm still trying to just laugh this off, but it was the beginning of the worst panic attack I'd ever experienced. If my friend wasn't there in her fight mode, I genuinely don't know what would have happened to us. I know it probably doesn't sound that scary, but this terrified me to my core. The way he changed so quickly, his movements and mannerisms, the way his face just didn't look human anymore, and how naive we were to go in there in the first place because it seemed like an innocent temple. We didn't get many answers from this situation because we were too scared to go back or cause problems, which is stupid. We didn't know if he was truly troubled or if there were actually people there getting hurt, tortured, or whatever else he was saying. It scared me as well to think about the fact that he knew that we were homeless, vulnerable girls at the time, that he may have lured us with the music that he hears us play. We were also completely tripping balls because I believe that he laced our stuff. I don't think I can say on here what my friend believed it was, but it was the worst experience ever. And I highly doubt that those girls he spoke about in the beginning were there consensually. When I was in high school, I had a strange encounter while riding my bike home from work. During my senior year in high school, I worked at a Target store from approximately 4 p.m. until 10 p.m., 4 to 5 nights a week. After assisting with closing the store, finalizing the registers, and completing other closing tasks, my coworkers and I usually left the building and headed home before 10:30 p.m. The store was not too far from a bike path that had also led close to my house. It would take me around 15 to 20 minutes to ride my bike home from work, traversing a bike path with a large subdivision. Around the midpoint of my journey home, there was a section of the bike trail that passed through an underdeveloped field and had inadequate lighting. I remember slowing down to change the radio station on my CD Walkman/radio. Yes, I am revealing my age here. When suddenly, I noticed a dark figure about 100 feet or 30 meters away from me on my right. This figure swiftly began running towards me from the dark field. In an instant, my fight or flight response kicked in and I pedaled my 18-speed mountain bike so vigorously that it felt as if though I could have qualified for the Tour de France. As I made my escape, I quickly glanced back and witnessed the person in black attempting to chase after me for a few moments. Needless to say, what would typically be a 15 to 20 minute bike ride transformed into a frantic 5-minute journey home at top speed and in top gear. That night, I obviously struggled to sleep well, and even now, during my darker moments, I occasionally reflect on that unsettling encounter. This was 4 years ago. I was 15 and I loved puzzles. I wanted to buy one but didn't have much money, so I went out with my sister, who was 12 at the time and short for her age, looking for random toy stores that sold off-brand and cheap toys. We found one in an area of town that didn't have much activity around. It didn't really look like a toy store in the front, and when you walked in, you could see that the shelves were full and looked like they haven't been rearranged in years. It kind of seemed like the store didn't really have a reason to be there, you know? There was a man at the cash register who noticed our coming in. I didn't really get a weird vibe from him or the store, it was just empty. So we looked around and there are no puzzles, so I go up to the man and I ask him, "Hey, I can't seem to find any puzzles. Do you know if there are any or any ones I might be missing?" The man answers, "Oh yeah, there are puzzles. They're downstairs." I didn't see any downstairs when we entered the store, but I was like, sure, show me the puzzles. And this was like the third store that we had tried, so I just wanted to find my toy, you know? The man walked around the counter and to this door that you wouldn't even notice unless you pointed at it. He opened and revealed a steep staircase going down. At the bottom was a plain wall. You would have to go left or right to enter whatever the room was. It didn't seem like there were toys down there. It was also kind of dark down there. And also, if there really was a downstairs to the store, wouldn't the door be open? At that moment, I got that stomach drop sensation and the get the F out of there feeling. The man was looking at me, waiting for my sister and I to walk down in front of him. I was like, oh, my mom is calling me. I'll be right back. And my sister and I got the heck out of there, and I never even been close to that store since. Maybe there were puzzles down there. Maybe there weren't. But I'm definitely not going to stay and find out. Also, it's very important to be careful in this sort of situation, because if I was right, and the man did have bad intentions, then if I had taken even just one step closer to that staircase, he could have pushed me down the stairs, and at that moment, there would have definitely been no possible escape. So don't go down random stairs, y'all, and be safe. I've worked in restaurants for almost 10 years, and I'm accustomed to getting out late. One night after finishing a double shift at a ramen spot, I had my usual beer and decided to Uber home. My Uber arrived, checked the plate and all, and the gentleman confirmed my name. I spent half of the ride almost dozing off. As the ride progressed, I noticed the driver kept staring at me through the mirror, never said a single word, no expression, just a blank stare. I figured exhaustion and the beer had gotten the best of me, and he was probably staring because he thought I was drunk. Later on, I also noticed that he had taken a different highway and that they were making our way through Rikers Island. It was a route that I wasn't accustomed to, but he had his ways open, and I figured that he was trying to take some sort of shortcut. He kept getting further into Rikers Island, and the area had become full of trees and construction machines, neon cones, and cracked cement. And he came to a sudden stop. My car just broke. Here, get out and call a new Uber." I was confused. There hadn't been any indication that a tire had popped or it had ran out of gas or anything like that. I got out, and before I could ask anything, he stepped on the gas and sped off, car perfectly fine. Alone by a construction zone, I started to freak out and called another Uber. When he arrived, his first question was why I was in the middle of nowhere, especially so late, as it was 1 a.m. at this point. I told him about the other Uber, and he urged me to report that immediately. I did report it and checked the profile. 4.8 stars, same license plate, but it was not the same man in the picture. The report never really got anywhere, and I can't help but feel that I encountered a possible murderer, or was he trying to leave me out there to be human trafficked or something? Thank God my Uber came so quickly. Now, a quick detail. This was almost 2 years ago when my husband and I just moved into a townhouse. We have our front door with a regular deadbolt lock, and our back door has, no joke, 5 different locks. Our city isn't always the safest, so we didn't question it. About 1 month after we moved in, we get a knock on our door. We were confused, but maybe it's a neighbor needing something, so my husband opens the door. It ended up being a man we hadn't seen before, and he said that he was a maintenance man here to fix our back door. We explained to him that we didn't call for anyone and that our back door was completely fine. He kept insisting that he was at the correct place, and we kept insisting no, he was in fact not. What threw us off was the fact that we have not personally seen him before, and we have met most of the workers since we needed some things fixed when we first moved here, and he also wasn't wearing a uniform like they usually do. Next thing we know, he goes, "Let me show you," and just walks right in and heads to our back door. My husband gives me a look as in saying, "Get up," and behind me, because it obviously made him nervous. The guy walks to our door and looks surprised seeing all the locks. He undoes them all and opens it for a quick second before saying, "Oops, wrong place," and just turns around and walks back out the front door without another word. My husband locks everything back up quick, and we literally never see that guy again. We didn't do anything as of calling the office like we should have, but we thought that maybe we were overreacting and that maybe it was just the wrong place, but it also felt like we were being scouted out in some strange way. Like every night, I work at 4 a.m., so I leave around 3:40 a.m. Unfortunately, in France, they decided to turn off the lights from 10 p.m. to like 6 a.m., I think. But thankfully for me, the landlord where I live turned on the lights just for me from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. It's very dim, but I'm thankful for it still. This Thursday night, as always, I left in my car. I locked it, turned on my lights, and something caught my eye. I looked up and thought it was just a cat jumping from my balcony since they love to come by and look around before leaving. However, it wasn't a cat. It was a man standing next to my balcony. I believe the lights surprised him, and as I watched, he walked away from me on the grass, but that wasn't an exit route. I stared at him, scared and calmly crying, unsure of what to do for about 10 seconds. Suddenly I saw movement again, and he started walking towards me, quickly looking at me before I continued walking to the main road as if nothing had happened. He took one last look at me in my car before disappearing from sight. It was really weird. He was wearing black sweatpants and a camo jacket. I don't know why he was here, whether he was sleeping on my plastic sofa on the balcony or something else, but I can't stop thinking about his face looking at me or what could have happened if it had been pitch black outside. I wanted to file a report with the police, but they said they can't since there was no damage. The lady I spoke to suggested that, quote, maybe it wasn't for you. Maybe he was looking around for a dwelling. I replied, at this hour and in this outfit? I don't think so. She then responded, no, I mean, robbery. Well, yeah, of course, lady. And since then, every night I run to my car like crazy, holding a pepper spray in my hand. I also bought a surveillance camera for my balcony to check before going out at night because I'm super paranoid. I'm even developing OCD, constantly needing to look and check outside before going to sleep. So dear random man, let's not meet again. We had a transfer join our team from another department within the company. He was almost completely deaf, which meant that he could only hear very loud noises and nothing else. However, he managed to speak out loud quite well and relied on lip reading to understand what was being said to him. It wasn't a big deal. We simply made the adjustment of facing him when speaking and talking one at a time. Initially, he was a decent team member, but after some time, he began making inappropriate comments to me and the only other female on the team. He would say things like, "Why haven't you made the coffee yet?" and other offensive, outdated jokes that targeted women, you know. And as part of my role, I provided him with instructions regarding customer requests and needs. Unfortunately, he frequently failed to follow the instructions, resulting in customer complaints. I often had to inform him that he needed to correct his work to match the original request. Afterward, he would storm into my office and yell at me as if his inability to read and follow simple instructions were my fault. I grew tired of it and told him, "If you did your job correctly the first time, there wouldn't be any complaints." Needless to say, he didn't take it well, and his anger was very unsettling, and I had a feeling that it wouldn't stop there. In the following weeks, he intentionally blocked doorways that I tried to pass through. On one occasion, when I was in the small office of the other female worker, he blocked the entire doorway. He stood there, wearing a super creepy smile as if challenging us, saying, "What are you going to do about it?" I refused to touch him in an attempt to push past. The other ladies seemed just as uncomfortable, and it was as though we could read each other's minds. We continued our own conversation about work-related matters and just ignored him. After several minutes, though, he finally left. Another time, I had to go to the far back of the warehouse to organize some items in a room. I remember thinking, okay, there are 2 cameras, and they can see this main hallway, but not the spaces between the shelving units. I had an uneasy feeling that he would come back there. And sure enough, a few minutes later, he burst into the room and came straight toward me. Being on high alert, I quickly exited through the other door and rushed back to where the rest of the team was located. I pulled up the security cameras to see if he had a valid reason to be in there, and unsurprisingly, he loitered in the room for a few minutes after I left and then departed. It was clear that he had no legitimate reason to be there at that exact moment. I shared this incident with a male coworker friend, and he offered to accompany me to any area away from the main team spaces. I had work to do, but I didn't trust that I could complete it without this angry individual finding me. Whenever we mentioned his anger or demeaning jokes, the managers would just dismiss it, saying things like, "Maybe he didn't understand because you spoke too fast," or "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." It was as if though they believed that having a disability meant that he couldn't also be a despicable person. Not long after, I learned from a teammate that this angry individual had grabbed the other female's upper thigh, just below her private area, squeezed it and asked, "Does this make you uncomfortable?" And then he laughed. A few teammates witnessed it, but they didn't know what to do, and the female worker froze up. I immediately went to HR and told them everything that he'd been doing to intimidate, belittle, trap, and, of course, harass us, and he was fired the next day. When they escorted him out, he yelled, "This is retaliation." HR asked me what I would make of that comment, and all I could think was that it had to do with me standing my ground with him. I was so scared to see him show up unexpectedly. I told my family what he looked like, his tattoos, the car he drove, anything that would identify him since they never met him. I blocked him from every social media platform as well. After he was let go, other females came forward and shared things that he had said or did to them too. They had told managers, but they dismissed it because the guy was deaf and they didn't want to deal with any lawsuits. And as much as I hate what he did to my coworker, I'm grateful it gave that final boost to finally get him fired. In my childhood home, we had an island in the kitchen with bar stools. If you sat at the furthest bar stool to the right, you'd be able to see through the door that opened up to the garage. One night when I was about 6 or 7, everyone else in my family was either in their bedrooms or in the living room watching TV. My dad worked nights at Briggs and Stratton, so he wasn't home. I was sitting on the bar stool furthest to the right having a nighttime snack when I look over and I see an eerily white hand wave at me. All I could see was the hand, and I was petrified. I didn't know what to do or say. The hand waved again and pointed down at the doorknob as if to suggest that I unlock it and open it. After that, I ran to the living room and yelled for my mom. She called our neighbor over to investigate, and we lived in a rural western Kentucky area, so it took a few minutes for him to get there. When the neighbor finally arrived, he looked around and couldn't find anybody. It had been raining that night, but we couldn't see any evidence of tracks into the garage or in the driveway. The same thing happened to my sister not long after. She's 1 year younger than me. She told me that she walked up to the door after the hand gestured to her and almost unlocked it, but then screamed and ran to my mother. To this day, I hate to think about what would have happened if either of us had opened that door, and I hate to think about who had been watching to see that the two younger kids were alone in the kitchen or how long they had been watching. I have lived in New York City my whole life, but this ranks as one of my oddest encounters. I probably owe my life to someone that I met only briefly. It was about 30 years ago, and I was coming out of my dentist, who was located on a desolate side street between Penn Station and 7th Avenue, not far from Macy's Herald Square. At around 6:30 p.m., my dental work finished, and the sun was just starting to set. I walked out of the appointment only to run into a man who repeatedly, intentionally body slammed me while pretending that it was an accident. I had formed an intention to say nothing, but slowly edged my way closer and closer to the open door of a chock full of nuts and make a quick dash for the entrance. Again and again, the man said, "Excuse me, miss," and slammed into me from the street side as I tried to pick my way across the sidewalk to the open door. He must have stepped back and hit me 6 or 8 times when out of nowhere, a larger man stepped forward and said, "Miss, where are you going?" Terrified that they were some sort of tag team, I said, "I'm trying to make my way to 6th Avenue's subway entrance at Macy's." This mysterious guy grabbed me and propelled me so quickly the couple of blocks to the subway that my feet didn't touch the ground, even though I was a young woman of large size and a former distance runner who could move with great speed. The mysterious man took me right to the train and then disappeared. My dad said that he was probably a plainclothes cop. I never knew who he was or what the other guy was trying to pull, but I will always be grateful for having been saved from something quite potentially bad. I, a 32-year-old female, grew up in Donetsk, Ukraine, a major city with my youngest sister only 7 minutes from the downtown. But the lifestyle was still pretty rural. Everybody had orchards and gardens. Many kept animals for food. We got milk and eggs from our neighbors, fish from local ponds and lakes. Kids of all ages walked around unsupervised, and adults would get together under the streetlights to talk while kids played. Unpaved roads, everybody walked or took public transport. There was exactly one family who had a car because they owned a home garage business and fixed cars. Winters were very slushy and summers were very dusty. Electricity was very unstable, and we spent many nights in the dark. A piece of cloth dipped in oil makes a great candle, and we were pretty poor. Our mother was an alcohol addict, fall down on the street and mud alcoholic. No dad. I always wanted a dad. When I was about 8 or 9, she met a man with his own apartment in a more city-like area, and the apartment had heat. Our house did not, so we started staying there for winters. To get there, we had to walk between 2 mountains in these woods, and right before, or after depending on direction, there was an open-air market that also had some kiosks, which mostly sold alcohol and tobacco products. So, this one day, Sister and I went to try and trade some bottles for coins so we could get something to eat that day, but at that time, most places didn't accept colored bottles. So with disappointment, we walked to the step-boyfriend's place through the woods, and this man comes out of nowhere and says how he's been watching us and felt bad for us, so would we like some money? Of course. 2 hungry, growing kids couldn't resist the offer, so we followed him as he asked. He led us to this tiny corner with a bush and drops his pants. I immediately felt terrified and grabbed onto my sister. He asked us to touch it, but I refused. I was kind of the spokesperson for us both, being the older one, and he starts to what I now know as being pleasuring himself. And at that time, I was just very scared and confused, so I angrily asked, "You promised us money. Where is it?" He finishes on this small bush and gives us 5 grivnia. Looking back, we must have had a guardian angel or something, because boy oh boy, could that have turned so dangerous incredibly fast. He was watching us and definitely saw 2 unsupervised, poor, dirty kids as easy targets. People like our mom shouldn't have kids. We got very lucky. She passed from drinking and we were sent to the orphanage, where eventually we got adopted to the United States, both of us. But so many aren't so lucky, and I always wonder, why me? So, this incident happened a few days ago. I work at a bar and will usually travel home between 12:30 to 1:30 a.m. In the warm months, I use my bike and electric scooter. On this night, I was riding the scooter. I was only a few minutes away from home at this point, but I had heard my phone go off a couple of times in my purse, so I decided to stop a moment to make sure it wasn't anything important. I realized this probably wasn't the greatest decision, but I don't normally get notifications like that so late at night. So I go to pull over on the sidewalk near a sloped entrance into a plaza that has a couple of bushes on either side, and on the left side a stone fence of sorts and more plants. I would have been maybe 15 or 20 feet away from the left at that point. So as soon as I stopped and went to get my phone out, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. It was a tall, thin man, standing up from where he had been hiding in the bushes on the left side of the entrance. He was looking at me, and he said something I couldn't make out and started to walk toward me. I immediately got the scooter in drive and back onto the road after that. I don't ever stop and talk to people at this time of night as a matter of principle, but anyone hiding in the bushes at 1 a.m. certainly isn't someone I wanted to deal with. Sadly, things like this happen a lot, though this instance was definitely one of the creepiest I've ever experienced. And yeah, I definitely realized that I shouldn't have stopped, let alone when I was so close to home. Don't make my mistake, and always be vigilant when you're out at night, especially when you're by yourself. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. EST, and there are super fun live streams every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday night. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and maybe you'll even hear your story featured on the next video. If you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends, and remember, the mold is a puzzle in the basement.